the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Authentic Audio Productions, providing personalized, full-service audio solutions for your podcast, whether it's business or pleasure, big or small. Get free show hosting, custom content creation, and professional recording tools all together in one affordable package. It's your one-stop shop for audio from A to Z. Visit AuthenticAudioPro.com today. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, September 30th. We're going to keep this little NFL pause for one more show. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the greatest hits, but we'll get to it all, probably mostly in a Thursday pod. We're going to probably add a third. Dan Soeman's going to join in a few minutes. We're going to have some baseball breakdown discussions in terms of the regular season finishing, asterisk, sort of, and some incentives that came with that. And then a quick look ahead to the big offseason, free agency, arbitration, extensions, trades, things like that. Just a bit of a precursor, not an official precursor, but I want to give baseball its due because it's been a marathon season, and some players are going to flip the switch quickly into business mode, and that's certainly where we come in. I mentioned I would get to some NFL stuff. We're going to have some deep dives on certain players, I think, just the way things appear to be headed, right? Especially with a couple of these quarterbacks. Let's talk some injuries. The Chiefs are banged up to high heaven, and they're rolling Samaje Perine and Kareem Hunt, and now some mix of Xavier Worthy and Justin Watson, and I guess Juju Smith-Schuster and Mecole Hardman are going to have to become factors here. I know the trade stuff's going to pick up. I'm sure every talking head is bringing Devontae Adams into the picture, except for the Raiders have two significant wins on their belts now. Look, I'm not crazy worried about this Chiefs team. The plan was certainly to sort of limp through this regular season, and I realize that's no pun intended now, but they still have a two tight end set, right? Noah Gray is above average. Travis Kelce, I think, when needed, can still call up well above average production, and that started yesterday. They probably wanted to wait until about week 6 or 7 to actually get him going for injury and longevity purposes. He's just going to have to step into the role now. So if you're a Travis Kelce owner, you're probably pretty happy about what's going to happen for the next couple of weeks here, even if they do make an acquisition, because that's certainly going to be the go-to target. So they're banged up. There's no question about it. Are they going to lose a couple of games, maybe 1 or 2 games that they shouldn't lose because of it? Yeah, that's just the nature of the beast. But I'm not necessarily worried about Pacheco and Rice and Marquise Brown, essentially, I believe, being out for the entire season. We'll see what happens. If they have to limp themselves towards that November 5th trade deadline, then yeah, we'll be talking about some acquisition possibilities. But I think for now, they're going to be just fine, especially in division with what they have and some scheming that they can make work to keep things afloat, because that's what their quarterback does. He is the put the team on the shoulders type of player, or opt for simple when complicated can't happen, and that's probably where they are. They probably just have to simplify everything and make sure that their options are available. So not super worried about that one. There's plenty of other teams in this league, not for injury reasons, that I have concerns with, and we'll save that for a different NFL pod. But I think I've talked about Sam Darnold every single podcast. I'm going to continue to talk about him because there's 2 things happening here. A, he's playing great, obviously. And I realize Minnesota almost destroyed that game, but Green Bay is a good team. Green Bay does have a good defense, and Sam shredded him for 3 quarters. And that's just not something we've seen from him. And the question has to start becoming why? Why haven't we seen this from Sam Darnold, from Baker Mayfield specifically? Because these 2 guys are really attached at the hip, and now on team 3 or 4, I guess, for Darnold here, it's all coming together. Why is it all coming together? Is it that they've grown up? I think to some degree, yes. The game has slowed down for them. They really do have a handle on NFL defenses and scheming. That's definitely part of it. They've been coached up or have personally put in the work to get themselves to a point where they are a veteran. That's part of it. And I wouldn't even say that's a majority part of it. The majority part of it is the team. And I know this is the most cliched thing in the world to say, but they finally found a fit. I don't think these are players. I think they've proven it to us. These aren't players that can transcend, that can just walk into an organization, read the room, understand the personnel, and mold their game to fit whatever is going to be needed for that specific offense. Coaches have tried, teams have tried to replace coaches to make these quarterbacks work, obviously. And for whatever reason, 9 out of the 10 times it's butted heads. And now it isn't. Okay. And oh, by the way, Baker's on his second OC in Tampa Bay. I think a lot of it is the same. Certainly the personnel, hasn't changed much there. But Darnold with Minnesota and Baker in Tampa are just freaking working. And it's going to get real complicated. We talked about Baker a little bit last week. He's got 2 years remaining after this. And while $30 million next year isn't phenomenal, I think it's enough for both sides to say, we'll deal with it for one more year. And then if we have to go big after that, we'll do it. Albeit they may take some of 2026 salary and roll it up to 2025 as a bit of an incentive, even if you have to make it not likely to earn incentives. That's probably something that happens if Baker continues down this path, just so that they can delay the big extension until 2026 offseason. That'd be how I read that right now. But Sam's a free agent. All right. Sam's operating on a 1-year contract. It was supposed to be a 1 year, maybe you play for 6 weeks and then JJ takes over contract. And obviously that's not happening. Okay. It's a 1 for 10. All 10 of that is now locked in outside of some per gamers. There's no incentives built into this thing. I did the deep dive on it. So it's 10, as long as he can stay healthy throughout the whole season. And then what? And it's a big then what now. And I know it's early still, and there's a lot of people saying, well, who the hell cares? It's week 4. Let's see the real Sam Darnold come to light in December. Fine. That's great. But it's been 4 outstanding weeks. This is a top 5 quarterback. And that would have been a laughable statement even just 6 months ago, as he was scouring free agency, after becoming a fill-in in San Francisco for Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. That's the turnaround. Okay, he went from sitting behind Brock Purdy to nearly leading the league as a starting quarterback. Doesn't happen. We don't have precedent for this. So if this even continues at 80% of this clip, there's going to be a free agent situation that we just don't get. Okay, we've had Cousins hit with a sour taste in his mouth. We've had Tannehill hit with a sour taste. You know what I mean? There's always been something. And I'm not saying Darnold will be the perfect free agent quarterback either, because there's 6 years of bad taste on his resume. But this appears to be peaking at the right time. And for teams out there that are just struggling, right? Tennessee, to some degree, the Giants, to some degree, Cleveland, that might have a winning roster with a quarterback problem. And the list could go on as the season progresses. This guy's going to be up there. Now, the decision is, how much do we value a 27-year-old, 28-year-old free agent quarterback who does have a rough history versus just going back to the draft, or even giving up draft compensation to get up in the draft and utilize the rookie wage scale? That's the fascinating thing now, is that rookie wage scale is so damn important and so damn effective and efficient that it just seems silly to think that somebody's going to pay Sam Darnold $200 million on March 13th, which is not crazy right now. If he's this player and Minnesota decides, Sam, it's been great, but we're going to roll with JJ. We don't want to put all of our eggs into your basket, because we should be able to plug and play 80% of this offense with JJ in a rookie wage scale situation. I wouldn't fault Minnesota for doing that, but that leaves Sam to the open market. Is Tennessee going to go full boat? I'm just using them as an example. Full boat on a worthy free agent contract for a player that, might be top 5 in many categories with the players that he has available to him, and Hockenson isn't even back yet, when Tennessee might be the number 4 pick and could parlay a 2026 pick into getting top 2. It's going to be a fascinating dynamic because we just don't have free agent quarterbacks available that can play that aren't 35 years old, right? Sam might have 10 years ahead of him left at 27 and change if he really has figured something out. But it goes back to my initial statement. And I think his coach has already said this out loud more than a couple times, and he said it again this weekend. Sam Darnold has not been the majority of the problem. The pieces and the organizations and the front office tendencies, let's say that, I'm trying to be gentle here, that have been around Sam Darnold have failed him. And I will tell you this, he is not doing that to promote Sam Darnold to the rest of the world. He is saying that as a look at what we have situation. And if I'm reading Kevin O'Connell right now, excuse me, boy, I don't mean to get the Browns back involved here. If I'm reading that room, and if that's a microcosm of what that whole organization feels right now, they are recruiting the ability to keep Sam Darnold, at least for now. Obviously, he's their guy for 2024. But the language that comes out of Minnesota is going to be very interesting, right? Because there's now this thing, and it's not unlike what Jordan Love had to go through with Aaron Rodgers. Now, that was a Hall of Famer who went back-to-back MVPs and really, locked Jordan Love to his bench. But we're in a situation now where if this is where Sam Darnold does work, where do we go from here? I love it. I love it because it isn't crazy to keep J.J. McCarthy on the bench for a couple of years and guarantee Sam Darnold 2025 and 2026. That's not bonkers, but it's not the best business, right? It might be the most successful way to win football games if Sam runs this season out like this, and Jefferson and Addison and everybody involved here 100% vouches for this player because it's all clicking. But we did just see Kirk Cousins average about 11 wins with this team. And, outside of the injury, there wasn't a massive draw for 35-year-old Kirk Cousins. So is that going to be the same similar, path for Darnold? Is it going to be he's a product of the system, and if he's trying to leave that system, if Minnesota decides it's McCarthy's team, and that's just the way we're going to operate because that's the best business move for us. We have already decided to go in that direction with the draft pick. It's the best business move to move on from Darnold and not pay him upwards of $200 million. Will another team value him with this production? Or will they look at him and say, man, he was just in the right spot? We don't have that 2 wide receiver set. We don't have one of the top 5 tight ends in football. Okay, we don't have a bona fide left side of the offensive line that could be first team All-Pro. And Minnesota does. And it's one of the reasons Kirk Cousins is a $300 million player in this league. All right. They did build properly and have for a long time. And I put Green Bay in the same conversation. Jordan Love can play, but Jordan Love was put into a situation that was ready for him to play football. And that's the big discussion across the league. Okay. Bryce Young obviously was not put in that position. CJ Stroud absolutely was. And CJ Stroud is a transcendent quarterback. And to some degree, I think Jaden Daniels might be as well. But the Houston Texans spent years, even with the Deshaun Watson disaster. Okay. That was in one corner, the Deshaun stuff. Remember him sitting on a sideline refusing to play, or them refusing to play him because they knew they were going to trade him both ways. But meanwhile, they've completely reorganized their front office, brought in all the Bill Belichick people from New England, Nick Caserio and all of them, and brought in that philosophy. 1 year, 2 year contracts. Anybody who sticks, we give a 1 year extension to. Anybody who doesn't stick, get him out immediately. Be involved in every single trade that's out there. Okay, if somebody's on the trade block, let's look at it. If it's possible, they made 4 trades in March this year just to get guys in their room because they want to have eyeballs on everybody right now. Okay, it's all about improving, even if it's our right guard could be better. Let's bring in 2 to compete with them. That's been their philosophy. They flood their roster with opportunities and competitions, and it's been successful. And I think they have a roster right now that should or could be in the AFC Championship game this year. And yes, CJ Stroud's a part of that, but a lot of the work came 2-3 off seasons before the idea of drafting CJ Stroud even happened. Many organizations won't do it. They won't do it to their fan base. And that's it. Okay. They want butts in seat. They want beers being bought. They want cars being parked every year. And quite frankly, the business model for that, for profiting, is to be average. Okay. The Dallas Cowboys are the greatest example of this. Be relevant, but we're not going to go so crazy. We're not going to process this roster. And that means at times ripping it down to start over. We're not going to go do that. We're not going to be that aggressive to where at any point in time, an entire season is lost and we start to lose fans and we start to lose revenue and we don't get the gate. That is the proper way to do it, though, is to have some pain and take your lumps and build this thing back up using that rookie wage scale. Now, does every team have to go that route? Of course not. Okay. For every 3 or 4 teams that do that, there's a team that can just go and acquire Matt Stafford. Okay. That's not normal, though. And those opportunities aren't just sitting there. But that leads me back to Darnold. Darnold may be playing himself, and because of the situation around him in Minnesota with McCarthy already here, it may be one of those scenarios where another team can just poach, put him into a situation that's similar, ready to roll, right? The offensive line is above average. The weapons are above average. And hope that he can just bring this newfound success to that organization, and that levels up that new team. So it's early, it's premature. We have no idea if Darnold can do this with any kind of regularity or consistency, but he has for a quarter of the season. And so it's really time to start talking about it. And I'll mention one more thing with this, which isn't crazy and might be, as of right now, the most likely way forward. Sam Darnold's contract has void years, but those voids happen 23 days before the start of the league year. Okay? Which does give them the ability to slap a franchise tag on Sam Darnold. It's not crazy. McCarthy has this injury. He's going to be recovering. Even if he's 100%, there's a ramp up. He's a rookie. So yes, he's been watching tape and holding a clipboard, but there's a physical ramp up that has to happen. And maybe they believe that can happen over the course of next summer, and that by week 1, he will be ready to roll. But if not, if there's even a little hint of doubt, franchise tagging Sam Darnold and giving yourself the opportunity to see how the summer goes, right? Keep Darnold on this $40 million franchise tag. And if you believe McCarthy does ramp up, now it's a tag and trade. And if not, Darnold makes $40 million guaranteed to be your quarterback for 2025 for at least a little bit, right? Or if not all. And redshirting McCarthy one more season, right? So a healthy redshirt year outside of this injured redshirt year. It's not inconceivable, and it might be the best way forward, all things considered. So it's early, it's premature, but we don't get these kind of situations too often where a guy has all of his eyes right now set on massive free agency at the quarterback position. So I'm going to continue to monitor it. We'll see what happens. But I'm telling you right now, the vibe coming out of Minnesota is, man, this is our guy. And if that's going to continue outside of a tag, it's going to be Buco Bank for Sam Darnold to stick around in Minnesota. And then what do we do now with our $22 million backup quarterback? All right, let's talk some baseball with Cousin Dan. All right, Dan, get me off this Sam Darnold train. I can't stop talking about this guy. I've been doing it for 3-4 weeks now. I won't bore you with that. I do want to talk baseball. It's kind of awkward because I had this date scheduled on the calendar for our big MLB offseason precursor preview show. And we can't even talk about the playoff teams because we don't even know the playoff teams because there's a freaking doubleheader in 8 hours that are going to designate the final 2 wildcard spots in the National League. And we're not going to go there because I'm not going to sit here and make this a Mets apologist conversation. But I don't know. I guess quickly, the teams that did slide in here, especially the Detroits and the Kansas Cities and some of the teams that essentially came out of nowhere. Are we headed for one of the better postseasons, or are you worried that it's just going to be a David and Goliath situation yet again here? Potential Dodgers Yankees type situation.
I think there's a really clear path for this to be a parity postseason, if you will. I mean, like the Dodgers are definitely not the Dodgers of old. Really, every roster you can kind of poke holes through. Even some of the, first half juggernauts like the Orioles. There's plenty of blemishes on their record at this point. So, I mean, you know me. Every time I come on here, I'm in one way or another talking about small samples. That MLB postseason is the ultimate small sample, especially after a 162 game regular season that then gets whittled down to a best of 3 series. I mean, even a best of 7 series is high variance, but even the best of 5 are even more so. So we're really not truly in a vacuum seeing who the best team is advancing, but I mean, that makes for good TV, right? So I do have like the obvious ones. There are obvious teams that, like the Yankees, the Phillies, they've been there recently in the past consistently. It wouldn't surprise me, if those 2 teams are in the World Series, but there's some other teams that are interesting here, right?
I took a long shot matchup bet on September 1st. I do it every year. And I was sweating bullets a little bit this last week because there was a bit of a flounder. But I took San Diego and Kansas City as the World Series matchup long shot bet on September 1st. Got really nice odds on it. It's not likely. I think Kansas City is probably, trending downward right now a little bit more than they should be, even though Bobby Witt Jr. is playing out of his mind still. But San Diego might be the hottest team in baseball, and that's a team that could certainly wreck some plans. But I would agree. I think in March when you and I talked, it was Yankees Phillies, and there really hasn't been outside of the Yankees injury situation, which has for the most part been. I guess they've cleared most of it. I know Rizzo's kind of banged up right now, but that's not a huge loss. It seems like those 2 teams could easily be there in 6 weeks.
Yeah, I have no holes to poke there. It's really about we really see these teams have had how many months now to really form their identity. It's how they execute their identity. I mean, the Yankees, with Juan Soto are a little bit different this year, but historically we've seen them just kind of bop their way through the postseason if they're going to win on the back of Garrett Cole plus whatever pitching staff they throw together by October. So if the Yankees do that and don't strike out 35% of the time or whatever, they're going to be set up really well to go far. The Phillies, they're like the ultimate depth, or they're like the ultimate yin and yang. I mean, obviously they perform well in the regular season, but sometimes I look at their roster and question their depth. Down the rotation and down the bullpen. But once you get into the postseason, none of that matters. And so once you get in with a roster I don't mean to be, I'm not poking holes in the Phillies, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. But when you have Aaron Nola, Zach Wheeler at the top of your rotation, really anything can happen the way these off days lay out, and you don't need a 5-man rotation. You can really narrow down your bullpen arms. It really becomes a top-heavy sport at that point. So a mixture of, knowing your identity, performing that, and being able to navigate, roster decisions are really amplified in this couple-week period here.
All right, we'll track plenty of this postseason stuff as it happens. It's just kind of fun to project some things. But like I said, Mets and Braves and Diamondbacks have to figure it all out tonight in about 8 hours or so, and we'll see where that lands us, and then we'll play the payroll game and see how all these teams got there and all that fun stuff. But that's gonna have to be for another day. Let's flip the switch a little bit. I'm starting to do the work on Spot Trek right now in terms of final year incentives and escalators and option situations, because it really comes up quickly on us, as you know. I know you've been doing a lot of 2025 work as well on the site. So I've got a like a small list of players that I've identified as as names that have to stand out for this upcoming offseason. I think, we very rarely get like a late year extension, mostly because Scott Boras owns all these guys and never does it. So I don't think too many of these names are going to change in that regard. Certainly some of the option decisions, which we'll do a whole pod about soon, that's going to be a bit of a wait and see. But I want to run through some of these incentives that I pulled out this morning, because I ran through the whole league and updated players based on their final stats. And there's some names here and there's some situations here. And by the way, I'm not going to sit here and cry about the Pittsburgh Pirates and all that. I know you were involved with that whole Rowdy Tellez situation that they DFA'd him before he was able to earn his incentive. I do have other examples, by the way, here of players that were just shy of big incentives this year, just to prove that this stuff happens every freaking year. But speaking of Scott Boras, Dan, we got to start with Jordan Montgomery. Arizona's probably going to make this postseason in the next couple of hours here. And Jordan Montgomery's going to have almost nothing to do with it. Right? Is this one of those? I mean, the Blake Snell stuff's incredible too, by the way. The fact that he sat out his last start and he's already into free agency, and Boras is already working his magic with that situation. But this Jordan Montgomery stuff just doesn't happen. Okay, the guy signs a week into the season with the defending runner-up World Series, right? And basically becomes a reliever in an hour and a half. Here's the thing. He still starts 21 games, which means he garnered himself the ability to opt out. It was after 10 starts, he can opt out. And now his salary for next year is $22.5 million. What do you do with this player? Is this guy really a starting pitcher? Should he opt out? Will he opt out? And what kind of player from a valuation standpoint is he on the open market in a couple of weeks, knowing that he's miserable about how it just went with Boras 1 year ago and then laid an egg in 2024?
Yeah, there's a couple of, I don't know the answer to really any of those questions, to be honest.
I know.
It's a really tough situation because the fact that this lingered and he didn't sign until the season after the season started makes you think there were like legitimate questions about his market, which we did kind of highlight in the offseason.
Yeah.
Like he sort of caught a drift at the end of 2023. And some people over projected what his salary could be. I think we were pretty close on what that market would be. So on the heels of a really bad season, I think it would be even more limited at this point. Or I guess I don't know what the advanced metrics look like on him. Maybe a smart organization looks and really thinks they can get a discount on a player that is not that old, considering should theoretically have some miles left. But maybe it's been so bad there that both sides want to move on and he doesn't want to try and do that. But 22.5 million for 2025, it's a good chunk of change to leave on the table if you're going to be signing like a 1-for-8 prove it deal. So just because you're unhappy at that amount, I lean that he's gonna stay and opt into that. But
that's exactly the point I was trying to make, and you said it nicely there. I don't think he's a $20 million player on the open market this year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So I the way you kind of set me up for that, though, I do think there is, like, if it has been so bad there and maybe he didn't even want to really land there in the first place, who knows? And
right.
The negotiations were not very public on that front. So I'm not really sure what to think of this, but if he wants to get out, I could see that being like a small percentage case, but otherwise, that's a big chunk of money to leave on the table with so much uncertainty in your future.
He was a over 4 WAR player last year. He was a minus 1.4 this year on a $25 million salary. That's bottom 5 worst values in baseball, according to our metrics. That's just what it was. I guess just last, is he a starting pitcher? If he opts into 22.5, does Arizona have to use him as a starter?
I mean, I think there would be a ton of motivation to make it work as a starting pitcher. Yeah. I long term, I don't really know how his stuff plays in the bullpen. That's the thing. I mean, like maybe he's like a long innings eater kind of guy, but and just to know, he did leave Boris after that. If
I know,
I just had to Google it to double check. I was going to say that, but I wasn't 100% on it. He did leave immediately after that. So who knows? Maybe his new agency has something creative up their sleeves to get him out of there, but still get him that money. So
yeah, he left him and then trashed him and then went on to be a minus 1.4 WAR. So it's been a banner year for Jordan Montgomery. Let's put it that way.
To bring this full circle, like the Diamondbacks have been a luxury tax hover in recent years. And there was some speculation coming into this season that if they weren't in contention at the deadline, that they might be one of those teams like the 2023 Angels who would try and shed some major salary in order to like get clear of that. And, who knows how this plays out in the next, 24 hours here with their playoffs. But I don't know, maybe that's another opportunity for them. Maybe they eat some money and take a major step back this year if they think things are like headed in the right direction. But we sort of thought there was some signal there last year, and it's kind of they've kind of continued chugging along, making it work. So
if he opts in, my guess is they eat 50% of that salary and send him back to St. Louis or something.
Yeah,
I would think that relationship is pretty worn, don't you think?
I think you just said it better than I was doing a long-winded way of saying that if there is trouble there, that there's probably motivation for both sides to move on. And if that's eating some money on the Arizona side, if that's, et cetera, I think that might be the way they go.
All right. Jonathan India signed a little 2-year extension through his arbitration here. So he is under contract through 2025. He's a nice player. I think he's been a bit underwhelming based on some of the projections that people had him at, yourself included, coming in here. But he basically bought out year 1 and year 2 of arbitration with this extension. So he does have eligibility in 2026 still, but he also increased next year's salary by $450,000 this year based on plate appearances. So, it's a little bit over $5 million. It's almost $5.5 million next season. This guy, though, to bring two things together, I think he's going to be at the top of the trade list. It seems like it. It seems like that Cincinnati's going to shed a little bit here and try to impact that pitching rotation as much as possible, where they do have some talent, and try to build themselves out from that way, which makes a heck of a lot of sense. Is that how you read this thing right now, or is this still a team that maybe is just okay being average because average is better than being in the basement?
No, I think that read is probably right. We had him as a trade target heading into this year, but middle infield injuries kind of handcuffed them, and they had to rely on Jonathan India. But otherwise, we thought he might be like a bench role type player with Matt McLean. So I think that is probably right. It's tough though, because he's somewhat limited defensively. Can be dynamic at times offensively. So it'll be interesting to see who wants to take him on with like a somewhat inflated, ARB3 salary, but I'm not really sure where that goes. I do think he is playing somewhere else though in 2025.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Let's go to your neck of the woods, the Cleveland Guardians. No real major bonuses to talk about, but Emmanuel Clase, your closer, I said that right? Clase?
Yeah.
Every time I hear it, it's different, by the way, including the broadcast. Emmanuel Clase, your Cy Young worthy closer for the Guardians, signed a Cleveland special, nice and low extension to lock up basically all of his team control and then some. He's about halfway through it now after 2024. He's going to be on the books next year for $4.5 million, then $6 million through the rest of his arbitration. And then he's got back-to-back club options. And what happened is he's got some nice incentives built in to escalate those options by a maximum of $2 million. Dan, he's already halfway to those escalations. And the production of these escalators is set to run from 2020 through all the way to the 2026. So he's got 5 years to get this thing's the vest. and he's already vested 500,000 of it. He's 2 appearances away from vesting the $1 million mark, and he's only 80 innings away from vesting the full 2 million increases on both of these options. He's going to get there probably next season, and if not, by the second week of 2026. So he's crushing this thing. I mean, he is ridiculously reliable. He's unbelievably productive. He's in the Cy Young conversation, at least from a top 5 or 6 standpoint in the American League based on what he's done. This guy's just an absolute gem. And the only reason I bring this up is obviously the escalators are interesting, but this is just another freaking Cleveland contract that they are winning already on. They won the second they signed this thing. And this is right. This is Corey Kluber and Jose Ramirez for two iterations all over again. Right.
Well, yeah, it's funny. The Kluber connection, because he was traded basically for one inning of Corey Kluber at the end of that contract. So, also one other note, he is the Guardians' all-time saves leader, and he is 26 years old. That he broke that he broke that this year. So that's just like kind of brings this all into focus, how dominant he's been at such a young age. And the arbitration numbers, this is probably a little road we could go down at some point, but it would we talk about Ronald Acuna and the money that the Braves theoretically saved on that contract, knowing how big closers can get, especially in arbitration and stuff. It'd be interesting to take a look at that, but
$13 million for 3 years of arbitration for him just doesn't seem right. I mean, it's going to escalate a little bit because he's going to be the reliever of the year probably, and he might be top 5 in Cy Young, so he'll get some bonuses there as well. But $13 million for 3 years of arbitration on the best closer in baseball is just that's just value. I don't know any other way to say it. It's value.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have too much to add there.
Charlie Blackmon signed a 1-year deal to return to Colorado to finish his career in Colorado completely. Obviously, he made his bank. Obviously, it's been a rough go from a winning standpoint, as you'll have in Colorado. Without looking, do you have a guess on the career earnings? Charlie Blackmon, I got 15 years on him, all in Colorado.
I ballpark. I don't know. Total gut like 140, 145. Didn't he sign like a 8 for 120 or something?
That's insane. It's 141 on the dot. So that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous on your part. He played out all 3 years of arbitration, avoiding every time. And then he signed a 5 for 94 extension, but that had tons of options built into the back end. It was a very Cleveland type contract coming for Charlie Blackmon. He finished that out in its entirety, signed the 1-year deal that carried a base of $13 million this past season, and banked an extra $1.5 million based on plate appearances because he was able to stay healthy. He missed, you ready? Here it is. He missed an extra $500,000 by 1 plate appearance. He had 499 plate appearances. He needed 500 to fully vest the bonus. Are we going to read a story about them giving him that $500,000?
You might. I mean, I don't.
Let me ask that differently. Should I tweet the fact that he missed this incentive by 1 plate appearance in hopes that Colorado eventually has to pay him this contract?
I mean, for consistency's sake, if you want to...
If I shit on the Pirates with Rowdy Tellez, right, I have to do this, right? I have to.
Yeah, and I mean, the Rockies are not... they don't always get knocked for being frugal specifically, but, they're not really a benefit of the doubt organization. So who knows? Who knows if there was any motivation there, but I'm trying to look at his game log and see how things were handled in the final week, but I might not get there.
Did they give him like a curtain call plumb out in the 7th inning?
I didn't see anything specifically, but I know there was like a lot with he does like a dugout routine and stuff like that. I saw some, before they hit
but you understand what I'm saying, right? If they gave him like if they put him out in the 7th inning for his curtain call and he missed an at bat, that's a $500,000 curtain call.
Honestly, it's worth looking into because he had two at bats yesterday in his final game. So,
oh my God, they did it! They did it.
Yeah.
I gotta research. This is gonna happen.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is bad radio that we're like.
No, it's great. No, we're gonna have an answer on Twitter in a couple of minutes here. So follow along. All right, down the path here a little bit. The Royals had obviously the Royals always build in incentive-based contracts. That's sort of how they get players to show up. They give them decent pays in terms of base salary. They do use signing bonuses, which a lot of teams don't use, and they build in tons of incentives. So a player like Michael Lorenzen, just for starters, he added over 1.3 million just based on innings alone. Michael Wacha added big incentives. Seth Lugo added big incentives, and now they're in the postseason, and there's opportunity for them to not only win some more ball games, but I think a lot of these players get multi-year guarantees now out of this thing. Don't you agree, Dan, that the recipe worked, the formula worked? I just spent about 10 minutes talking about the Houston Texans in the open and how they're one of those teams that just isn't afraid to rip it down and start the process over with like 90 contracts. You know what I mean? Give me everybody. We're going to weed people out in May. We'll weed some more out in June. We'll meet, you know what I mean? They just want everybody in the fold, and then they're going to find the mixture, the recipe that works. And that's going to become when they push. And this seems like the year that they figured some things out, at least rotation wise, and certainly with Bobby Witt. And at the deadline, they did make a push. They did add a couple of bats and some things that made me internally, because I've been watching this stuff for a lot of years, made me think, oh, they think they're ready. They believe that they have a shot to be that 2015 team that snuck up on everybody and basically swept the Mets at Citi Field. It feels like they feel it, and that's why I put some money on them to at least show up in that World Series. That's the process, though, right? And if they like these players, I think they're going to extend a few of these players. Do you agree that they probably feel like they have a good run in this team right now? Or are you not buying the sauce? Let's ask that question.
Maybe I'm just an AL Central hater, but I don't know if I totally buy it. I mean, I like what they've done around the edges here. You know, a lot has went right with the pitching staff. They pretty much nailed all of those signings. Lorenzen was a trade from the Rangers, but they're pretty much 5 deep there.
Yep.
With Reagans, Lugo, Wacha, et cetera. So I just don't know if I buy the offense, to be honest. You know, that's been on the heels of like an insane season from Bobby Witt Jr. If that comes back to life at all, I sort of like look at what's beyond that in future years and wonder like, you know, where you know, the production gets made up. Now, him and Vinny Pasquantino, that's like a really nice core. I've referenced this in the past, but sort of there's some data that shows you really only need 3, maybe 4 players as a core to build around in an organization. You have 2 right there. You know, Cole Reagan's maybe a third, if you want to call it that. So they're not far away, but I'm a little bit like MJ Melendez was a guy I was like hoping kind of took a step forward this year. It didn't really happen. They're sort of relying on some veteran depth beyond that. So again, I'm not trying to say this team can't make a little run in the postseason. I'm saying long term, I'm not really sure I'm like ready to say that like they've arrived or anything like that. But the moves they've made around the edges to get where they are have certainly been nice. But a big chunk of this, I feel, is on the heels, you know, on the back of Bobby Witt Jr. So
Clayton Kershaw added $2.5 million because of 7 starts. He had a very nice incentive-based contract to sort of work him back to health and then on the mound, and we'll see what he can do in the postseason. But that certainly helped as well. He also added $5 million to his 2025 salary. So it went from $5 million to $10 million for next year, which seems high. It seems a little bit high after, you know, about half of that. He actually made $7.5 million this year with the incentives. So is he back on a 1 for 10, Dan, or is he going to walk off into the sunset after 2024?
For the 3rd consecutive year, I'm punting and saying I truly don't know. Man, their pitching though, like depending on how some of this injury stuff goes, they could be really in search of some pitching next year, right? Again.
Easily.
But I lean he's back for one more year, not wanting to go out this way. But that might be a little too narrative-y.
I think I like the idea of him and Ohtani sort of splitting shifts on the mound.
Yeah.
So you could slow play both of them, kind of 50% each of them, and work yourself that way. But they're still at least one starter short right now. There's no question about that. They know it. The injuries have been devastating. Who knows what happens with Glasnow to see if he's back to full health next year. So they're short. There's no question. Luis Severino added $2 million with the Mets for his unbelievably breakout season. Something you saw coming when he signed with the Mets. I groaned, and you said, "Ooh, I like this," and
loved it.
Clearly, there was some analytics behind it. He was about to turn the corner. He was in some bad spots. It's not unlike the Sam Darnold conversation I just had. Right? He just had to, health wise, fit wise, experience wise, maturity wise, it just all came together. That's exactly what Severino had this year. And quite frankly, after watching 150 Mets games, he was one of the dugout leaders. I mean, he's the guy rallying the troops and speaking with the starting pitchers on the side. He's not the kid, the punk that was out there for the New York Yankees throwing his arm out every 6 starts. He's much, much matured from that. Big contract, one of the bigger pitching contracts this offseason.
I think so. Yeah. I know I paused for a second, but I mean, it's pretty rare you get exposure to a guy who has had multiple years of 200 plus strikeouts, 200 plus innings. I know he's had some injury concerns. I don't know. I have been a Luis Severino apologist. I think he sort of got a bad rap in New York for some like fluky injuries, plus some like really bad home run variants in a homer in a hitter friendly park. I think there were always a lot of expectations on him to be an ace at times, and it was not always deserved, if you will. But regardless, I think he has to set up for. I mean, look at the pitching free agents. Like, who are we excited about? Some people will still not be excited about him, but I'm just saying the pedigree, the production he's had in the past. The Mets were, I loved that. Him and Sean Manaea, I loved his signings just because of that fact. You don't often get players with that sort of production at that price, in my opinion, on the free agent market. So
Severino's a UFA. Just contractually speaking, Sean Manaea has a $13.5 million player option that he is definitely going to punt on, because he is, for all intents and purposes, he is the ace of the New York Mets right now, which is just a crazy sentence. 6 months removed from him being the 4th or 5th option on that roster, and really any roster. He was not a wanted player by many after kind of being exiled out of San Francisco. So just a couple of remarkable turnarounds on the mound for the Mets, and we'll see if it gets them into the postseason in just a few hours here. Nate Eovaldi. It was an absolute train wreck of a season for Texas. The kids just didn't get there, and some of them started to percolate a little bit, I guess. White leg for one. There's a lot of salary on this roster, Dan, and they added $3 million more to Nate Eovaldi because of incentives. Because signing him was very incentive laden, as many of his contracts have been. We'll finish with this, because this is the reigning champs, who went from first to basically worst, something we haven't seen in this league in a long, long time. Not Miami Marlins notwithstanding, who do it on purpose, by the way. What are we seeing in the next couple of months with this team? Because they're locked in a lot of spots. They are completely locked. Are they going to try to force themselves out of some of this stuff with some trades, some retained salary, or is this just about adding to this and hoping that you have the right recipe to make all of this money get you back into the postseason?
I don't know the level of aggressiveness here, but I think a lot has to just be on like positive regression next year, right? A lot of underperformance, a lot of their young players, Evan Carter, Wyatt Langford, you sort of were hoping took a step forward, did and didn't. But I mean, there was always a lot of projection in this lineup. This is, a team that last year really, I referenced it earlier, caught a draft and just played well on, and won a World Series because of it. Probably a little bit over their heads, but again, they pushed chips in, spent money, and went for it. I think they're going to sort of hope things shake themselves out because, like you said, there isn't a ton of flexibility immediate in the short term in 2025. A little bit frees up beyond that, but for next year, I think they just have to kind of run it back and hope things improve. And I mean, Jacob deGrom.
Yeah, what do you do there?
Well, he looks healthy and looks good, and I think you just got to ride it till the wheels fall off. And maybe he returns to top 5, dare I say, top 3, number 1 overall pitcher in baseball. I mean, he looks good. I don't know if you've seen any of the minor stuff, but he looks good finishing. So I'm willing to just say that like there's some meat on the bone. If the public is down on this team entering next year, I can already tell you I'm in. Yeah, for sure.
3 years, $115 million left on DeGrom. I mean, he better look good. He better give him at least one season. That's really all they need, right? Is one full Jacob DeGrom season to get something out of that money, because otherwise, historically bad buy, historically bad get for this Texas franchise trying to. Right, this is after the fact. This is the cover up Max Scherzer. This is the cover up some players that were already giving them injury history trouble, and then they punted on Martin Perez, who basically signed for $5 million to join the Pittsburgh Pirates. Right, so the decisions were questionable. Let's put it that way. Coming off the World Series, and they're right. They're going to be stuck with it for the most part. Maybe you can move a player like Adolis Garcia if you need to. He's on a somewhat cost controlled arbitration extension. But it's going to be a little nickel and dimers like that. It's not going to be big swings. And I don't anticipate them being aggressive. I think what you're saying is correct. Let's let these kids grow up. Let's let DeGrom get healthy and try to get a full year out of him, even if it's 25 starts. And that should be enough, because Houston is going to slide eventually. I know they've still found themselves 10 games above the rest of this division, but everything else about this division is weird. Let's put it that way. And all they have to do is just remain healthy, and I think they're going to be relevant. I'm with you. They're an early buy-in team for sure.
Yeah, let me just round off the point. Their projected, let's just say their projected starters for next year begin with DeGrom, Eovaldi, John Gray, Tyler Mahle. So that is an extremely strong. I mean, you can say all those guys will look their age, but that's a really strong starting 4. Corey Seager, Marcus Semien, Adolis Garcia. You add in Wyatt Langford, maybe a really a bounce back year from Evan Carter. Somebody try and talk me out of it for 2025 Texas Rangers bets already. So
and you follow the prospects quite a bit. There's still a couple of guys, right? Kumar Rocker could hit. He could be the 5th starter for this team next year, right? And that could really round things out. So it's there. All right, we exhausted ourselves just based on some incentive players. We've done a lot of work on some of this free agent stuff. I'm going to ask you this because it's relevant right now with the landscape of baseball and what's about to happen in a few hours here. If the Mets don't get in, if the Mets get swept in this doubleheader, is this it for the Pete Alonso era?
Oh, I don't. Oh, sorry. I was thinking you're asking me.
Not because they got swept. I'm just saying if the Mets season is over, is Pete Alonso's tenure as a Met over?
No, man, I don't know. I'm going to go back. This is such a tough one just because I don't think David Stearns wants to build with a let's just conservatively call it a $25 million first baseman, right? I have hesitation, but Pete is Queens, right? I mean, I literally can't mentally picture him anywhere else. So maybe that's just my own fault, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to say they get it done, but man, it's tough. It's tough.
I'm going to bring in
what do you say? Yeah.
I'm going to bring in a football reference. Obviously, my mind has changed 11 times this year. Everybody's has, including probably him and his agent and David Stearns, because it's been a weird ass year, right? I mean, Pete's been above average, but not Pete standard. to any degree. I mean, he's going to finish with, I think it's 31 and 90, something like that, home runs to RBIs, right? So it's right there. It's right where you want to be. But to your point, if you're a first baseman, you've got to be exceptional to buck the trend, which is flatlining prices, right? I mean, Freddie Freeman, a perennial MVP candidate, didn't get the money he wanted. He didn't. Okay. He went to the best team. He took a little bit less than he wanted. He got the extra year because that's nothing to the Los Angeles franchise. But he wanted to stay in Atlanta on a certain price point, and the Braves wouldn't even come close to it. And that's currently happening with the Mets and Pete Alonso. That's been happening for the better part of 2.5 years here. Okay. Pete wants 8 years at a certain price. The Mets have offered 6 at a certain price. That's what we're hearing from all the Mets people who are pretty locked into this stuff. Whatever David Stearns has offered, and I believe there's been an offer there since probably February 1st, or whenever Stearns took over and actually sat down with the stuff and looked at it and put his spin on this entire Mets front office, which has been, by the way, phenomenal. His work has been phenomenal all year. His work alone is the reason the Mets are in this position today. That's it. This is a front office built team. This has nothing to do with players outperforming themselves. It is they are in the right spot, in the right lineup with the right superstars, right? Lindor certainly has transcended things. I believe there's an offer on the table that has been on the table for, let's say, 8 months. And I'm going to make a Brandon Ayuk call. Brandon Ayuk was offered a contract on March 10th by the 49ers. And every time his agent called the 49ers and John Lynch, they said, you know what our offer is. It's not changing. You want to go, you want to show up to practice, you want to show up to camp. That's your prerogative. But this is our offer. This is what we are able and willing to do. And we would love to have you here for the next 3 years, fully guaranteed. That's what they offered. And what happened? All this minutia, all this BS, all this, talking heads on the morning shows. He took the exact offer and went and played football for the 49ers. I believe that's how this finishes out. Now, Boris will go out there and do his work, okay? And he'll have some stakes in Kansas City because they could use a good first baseman. He'll have some stakes in Chicago because the Cubs have been linked to him for forever. He'll certainly go to the Florida teams where Pete grew up, right? He's going to make the rounds, but I'm with you. I believe that it will become more apparent that Pete belongs in Queens for X number of years, maybe it's 6, and that David Stearns will not bend. He will not go to 8 years. There is an offer. It is the offer. It will remain the offer on December 1st. It will remain the offer on January 1st. That's just my read. Because you're right. Teams are taking defunct future Hall of Fame players out of their position and making them first baseman. I mean, that's what the position has become. It's basically a secondary DH. It's, you can play a little bit of field, so go play first base and you can still mash 35 home runs for us. That's what it's become. So you're not going to pay a price for that. You're not going to pay a premium for that. So I think it's the David Stearns offer that never changes, that Pete eventually just falls back into, whatever that is.
Yeah, I like how you put all of that. I totally agree with the caveat. I'm sure you're on board with this though, that the offers are similar, right? I mean, like if Tampa gets high
right,
and wants to, go way over market value to make a splash, then then all bets are off at that point. But I agree with you. Like we saw that exactly with Ayuk, where the Niners basically said, we have deals in place for you. Yeah. If you're ready to go, those places will pay you. If you want to go. And he basically said, nah, I'm good. I'll stay here. So same with the Mets. I think by all means, Pete could really be a career Met. He's by all accounts enjoyed his time there. He fits so well in so many ways that I think if the money is comparable, he stays there.
And we'll finish on this because it is kind of a nice way to, I guess, start the off season. Many teams are the off season right now. There are so many examples now of contracts of teams that went above and beyond the bid just to get a guy in the door that have just fallen flat on their face in this sport. Right? Baseball's been the overpay to play for forever, and it's gotten smarter. It's gotten more analytical. Certainly, there's more value in the game, and it's a lot about the youth movement. But to some degree, this is the Anthony Rendon stuff, right? If there's one team that'll blow you away, you can go take that contract, but it might ruin your career. It might ruin whatever legacy you've built up for 6.5 years. And there may be no looking back from that. That happens more than it doesn't in free agency in this sport. It just does, right? You're set up to fail because you're 30 years old already, because you've played more than half of your career already. And yeah, I know the money's stupid, but 6 for 180 versus 8 for 210. You know what I'm saying? That's probably where we're going to be here. Is
for sure.
a $30 to $25 million window of overall value, and it could be the Angels offering it, or you could stick with the Mets for a couple of years less. So it's a funny dichotomy. Yeah,
and it's kind of funny. Well, I'll another cross-sport local reference. I don't know if you saw the Gabe Davis interviews after playing in Buffalo, but you can tell that dude still wants to be with his old chick, right? Like,
yep.
they were asking him like how was it? What do you think of your old team? And you can just see the glimmer in his eye that he chased the money, rightfully so. He had one opportunity in his life to go make that money, but you can tell that he sees that he's in a way worse situation. And I think that's a similar sentiment to a lot of free agents that, like the grass isn't always greener, even if the money is, if you will. So
beautiful. Thanks, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. See you.